Welcome to Moonlight Tales by Crawford. Where are you watching from? The days following the night at the Hamilton mansion felt like a dream Alexa couldn't escape. Each morning, she woke up in her small, cluttered room in the Amin mansion, the weight of the secret she was carrying pressing down on her like a 1,000-pound boulder. She didn't want to think about it, didn't want to relive it, but it consumed her thoughts. Every glance, every whisper, every fleeting moment made her feel as though the truth was close to unraveling. The worst part? She wasn't even sure what Alexander believed anymore. In the days that followed, Alexander's behavior had changed subtly, but it was enough for Alexa to notice. He had always been polite, but now there was something deeper in his gaze when he looked at her. There was an unspoken tension that lingered between them, something that made Alexa want to shrink into the shadows, but at the same time, she found herself yearning for answers. She had to see him again. It was an unavoidable feeling, like the pull of gravity. She wasn't sure if it was because of the way he had looked at her or the fact that the entire situation felt so out of her control. But with the secret between them, Alexa had an overwhelming need to confront him, to find out what he truly thought of the events of that night. Alexa was in the mansion's kitchen, attempting to focus on the mundane task of washing dishes, when she heard the sound of a car engine pulling up outside. Her heart skipped a beat. It had been days since the night at the Hamilton mansion, but hearing that sound was enough to send a chill down her spine. She stood still for a moment, unsure whether she should continue her chores or run and hide. But her curiosity got the better of her, and she quickly wiped her hands on a towel and stepped toward the window. Her breath caught in her throat when she saw the familiar black car parked in front of the mansion. It was Alexander. He had come to the house. The sound of his footsteps grew louder as he approached the door, and Alexa's heart beat faster in anticipation. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, ready for whatever confrontation might arise. But there was no avoiding it. She heard the door open, and there he stood. Alexander, looking as dashing as ever in his crisp suit, his eyes searching the room as if looking for something, or someone. He spotted Alexa almost immediately, and his gaze locked onto hers, sending a shiver down her spine. For a moment, there was silence between them. No words. Just the electricity in the air, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "Alexa," he said, his voice calm but with an edge that Alexa couldn't quite place. "We need to talk." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. Her mouth went dry, and she nodded slowly. "What is it that you want to talk about?" Alexander stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've been thinking about the night we spent together," he began, his tone careful, almost guarded. "And there's something that doesn't add up." Alexa's pulse quickened. She felt her stomach twist in knots. Had he figured it out? Did he know it wasn't Hannah? "Listen," he continued, his voice softer now, as if he were trying to reach her. "I know what you did. What happened that night, it's not like what I thought it would be. There's something different about you." Alexa's breath caught in her throat, and she instinctively took a step back, feeling her anxiety rise. She could feel her heart racing in her chest. The weight of his words threatened to crush her. "I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to sound composed. "I've spent years in this family, Alexa," Alexander said, his voice steady. "I know a thing or two about people's behaviors. And you, there's something in your eyes. Something I couldn't quite place when we were together. Something different. Something real." Alexa's mind was spinning, but she couldn't allow herself to panic. She had to stay calm. She had to keep the secret safe. "You're mistaken," she said, forcing herself to sound more confident. "There's nothing special about me. I'm just, like everyone else." Alexander's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. Instead, he let out a deep sigh, as if he were trying to make sense of his own thoughts. "I'm not sure what it is," he murmured, mostly to himself. "But I need to figure it out." The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and confusion. Alexa tried her best to avoid Alexander, but it was nearly impossible. He seemed to be everywhere, at the mansion, in the halls, at events that Alexa had no choice but to attend. Each time their eyes met, a deep, unspoken tension seemed to pass between them. Hannah, on the other hand, had been acting strangely. There were moments when Alexa would catch her watching her with an unreadable expression, and Alexa could feel the weight of her sister's threat lingering in the air. It was as though Hannah knew something, though Alexa had no way of confirming her suspicions. Then, one evening, as Alexa was heading to her room, she found herself face to face with Alexander once again. "You're avoiding me," Alexander said, his voice low, almost accusing. "Why?" Alexa opened her mouth to respond, but her words faltered. She didn't know what to say. How could she explain? How could she tell him the truth without destroying everything? "I'm not avoiding you," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say." Alexander took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "You don't have to say anything. Just, let me figure this out." And just like that, the unspoken tension between them deepened, and Alexa knew that this was only the beginning. The days that followed were filled with mounting anxiety. Alexa had tried to bury the truth, but it seemed to seep through the cracks of her carefully constructed life. Each interaction with Alexander made her feel as though she was slowly unraveling. One afternoon, as she was cleaning the mansion's grand hallway, she was interrupted by a call. It was Hannah, her voice sharp and urgent. "You need to keep your mouth shut," Hannah warned, her tone cold. "If you think for 1 second that you can tell Alexander the truth, you're wrong. I'll make sure you regret it. I'll ruin everything for you. Do you understand?" Alexa's heart sank. "Hannah, please." "No," Hannah snapped, cutting her off. "You don't get to speak. You're just a tool, and you'll play your part. That's it." The line went dead, and Alexa was left standing there, staring at her phone. The weight of her sister's threats hung heavily over her, suffocating her in a way she had never felt before. She had no choice now. She had to keep the secret. She had to play along with the lies, for as long as it took. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the truth was a dangerous thing, and it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. The tension in the Amin mansion grew unbearable as days passed. Alexa had been doing her best to ignore the growing unease in her gut, but there was one thing she couldn't escape: her body was changing. Something was happening, something she hadn't expected or wanted. The nausea had worsened. The fatigue had become overwhelming. Her period was late, and despite her best efforts to ignore it, the signs were undeniable. She hadn't wanted this. She hadn't asked for this. But there was no escaping the reality that something was different. Something was happening inside her, something that could change everything. 2 weeks after the night at the Hamilton mansion. It was late in the afternoon when Alexa found herself alone in the small, dimly lit bathroom of the mansion. Her hands shook as she stared at the small, white plastic stick in her hand. The test result was there, staring back at her in black and white. Pregnant. Her heart sank as she let the stick fall into the sink, her breath coming in shallow bursts. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. She had taken the contraceptive pill. She had done everything she could to avoid this. How could this be happening? But the truth was inescapable. She was pregnant, and she had no idea what to do. Later that evening, Alexa sat in her room, her back against the wall, staring blankly out the window at the darkening sky. The weight of what was happening crushed her. She was supposed to be in control of her life, but now it felt like she was a puppet, tangled in strings she couldn't see or untangle. The door creaked open, and Alexa's heart skipped a beat. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "Hannah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You've been avoiding me, hon." Hannah's voice echoed from the doorway. There was an edge to it, something cold and calculating that made Alexa's skin crawl. What's wrong, Alexa? You've been looking pale, as if you've been hiding something. Something I should know about? Alexa's pulse quickened. She knew what was coming, but she wasn't ready for it. Not yet. She hadn't even processed it herself. Nothing is wrong, Alexa said, forcing herself to sound calm, even though her insides were twisted in knots. I'm just tired. Hannah stepped closer, her heels clicking against the floor. You're lying, she said, her voice dangerously low. I know something's going on. And I want to know what it is. Before Alexa could respond, the door burst open again. Zena, her stepmother, entered the room, looking frantic. Alexa, what's going on? I have a feeling something isn't right. You've been acting strange. Alexa felt the world spin as the walls closed in around her. She had to hide the truth. She had no choice. If they found out she was pregnant, everything would change. The power Hannah had over her would grow exponentially, and the consequences would be worse than anything she could imagine. Don't worry, ma'am, Alexa said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound strong. I'm fine. I'm just going through a lot right now. Zena stepped closer, her gaze thoughtful with concern. You're my stepdaughter now, Alexa. If something's wrong, you can tell me. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together. She was just saying this because she wanted her to be out with the truth immediately. But Alexa's mind was already racing. If she told anyone the truth, if she told them that Alexander might be the father, it would ruin everything. The fact that Alexander, the heir to the Hamilton fortune, was involved made it even worse. The scandal, the consequences, the dishonor it would bring to their families, Alexa couldn't let that happen. They will surely make her go through some procedures because they specifically have her the pills. I'm fine, Alexa repeated, more firmly this time. I just need some time to think. Hannah's eyes narrowed as she studied Alexa, suspicion flickering in her expression. She knew her sister better than anyone. She could see the fear, the uncertainty in Alexa's eyes. I'll be keeping an eye on you, Hannah said, her tone dark and final. And I'll find out what's going on, one way or another. As Hannah turned to leave, Alexa felt the weight of the threat hanging in the air. She couldn't let this secret slip. Not yet. Not now. Despite her best efforts to push the issue out of her mind, Alexa couldn't ignore the changes happening in her body. Her morning sickness had worsened, and the weight of her growing secret was becoming unbearable. Every moment, every breath felt like it was building towards something she wasn't prepared for. It was during a rare moment alone in the mansion's grand hallway that she saw him again. Alexander. Standing at the far end of the hall, as if waiting for her. He looked at her with the same piercing gaze that had once made her feel both seen and exposed. Alexa, he said, his voice low. I've been thinking about you. About everything. Her heart stopped for a moment, but she forced herself to maintain composure. She couldn't let him know. She couldn't let him get any closer to the truth. I don't know what you mean, she said, her voice shaky. There's nothing to talk about. But Alexander wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. You know what I mean. You've been different lately. And I can tell that you're hiding something from me. Alexa's breath caught in her throat. The last thing she wanted was for Alexander to get too close to the truth. She had already lied to him, manipulated him in ways she never thought she would. And now, this pregnancy, this life growing inside her, she couldn't let him know. She couldn't. I'm just dealing with things, she said, the words coming out in a rush. Personal things. It's nothing you need to worry about. For a moment, Alexander studied her in silence, and Alexa felt as though he could see straight through her. Then, his expression softened, a hint of vulnerability flickering in his eyes. "If you ever need to talk," he said quietly, "I'm here. But you don't have to do this alone." Alexa's heart ached as she looked at him. If only he knew. If only he understood the truth. But she couldn't tell him. Not yet. She wasn't ready. As Alexander walked away, Alexa's hand instinctively went to her stomach, her thoughts swirling. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't part of the plan. She had been a pawn in someone else's game, but now, there was no turning back. The days had been a blur of anxiety for Alexa. She had spent every moment trapped in her own thoughts, tormented by the reality of her situation. The pregnancy test had confirmed it, she was carrying Alexander Hamilton's child. And the worst part? She had no idea how it had happened. She had taken the pill. She had done what she was supposed to do. So why had it failed? Her fingers trembled as she clutched the test, her mind racing through possibilities. Maybe she had thrown it up too quickly. Maybe her body had rejected it. Maybe something else had happened. A knock on the door startled her. She quickly hid the test under the pillow and straightened herself, forcing a neutral expression onto her face. "Come in," she called, trying to keep her voice steady. The door opened, and to her horror, it wasn't just anyone, it was Zina, her stepmother, and behind her stood Hannah. Hannah's eyes scanned Alexa's face, and a slow, knowing smile crept onto her lips. "You look pale," she said casually, walking into the room. "Feeling unwell, sister?" Alexa stiffened, her heartbeat drumming in her ears. "I'm fine," she said quickly. Zina sighed, crossing her arms. "You're not fine. And I think we all know why." Alexa's stomach turned. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Zina and Hannah exchanged glances before Hannah took a step closer. "Let's stop pretending, Alexa. We both know what happened that night. And we both know that you took the pill to erase your little mistake. But here's the problem," Hannah leaned in, her eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "You were set up." Alexa's blood ran cold. "The pills you took weren't contraceptives," Zina said, her voice calm but firm. "They were switched." Alexa felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. What?" she stammered. Who switched them?" Hannah smirked, her eyes gleaming with pleasure. "That's the best part, dear sister. It wasn't me." Alexa's mind reeled. If it wasn't Hannah, then who? Who would have tampered with something so personal, something that had changed the course of her life forever? She was confused, she had only wanted to help Hannah, not knowing their evil plans. "You'll find out soon enough," Zina said, turning to leave. "But until then, you better prepare yourself, Alexa. Because things are only going to get more complicated from here." That night, Alexa barely slept. The revelation had shaken her to her core. Someone had intentionally ensured that she got pregnant. But why? And who? Morning came too soon, and with it, another visitor. Alexa was walking through the garden when she heard footsteps approaching. She turned, and her heart nearly stopped when she saw him. Alexander. He looked as composed as ever, but there was something in his eyes, something deeper, something she had never noticed before. "We need to talk," he said softly. Alexa hesitated. She wasn't ready for this. Not yet. But something about the way he looked at her made her nod. "Fine," she whispered. He led her toward a secluded part of the garden, where the trees provided shade and the world felt quieter. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alexander sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You've been lied to, Alexa," he said finally. "There's something you need to know." Alexa's breath caught in her throat. "The pills were switched," Alexander said, confirming what she already knew. "But it wasn't done by Hannah. It was done, on my orders." The world tilted. "What? Alexa whispered, stepping back in shock. You did this to me? Alexander's expression remained calm, but his eyes were filled with something raw, something real. I did it to protect you, he said firmly. And I would do it again. Alexa's hands clenched into fists. Protect me, she spat. You got me pregnant, and you think that's protecting me? You don't understand, Alexander said, stepping closer. I had to do it, Alexa. Because if I didn't, you would have been cast aside. Forgotten. Used and discarded by the very people who should have protected you. Alexa's mind spun. What are you talking about? Alexander took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly. Alexa. I've loved you since we were children. Her entire body froze. I've known you my whole life, he continued. I watched you grow up in that mansion, treated like a servant while Hannah got everything handed to her. And it killed me. I wanted to take you away from it all. I wanted to protect you. But I knew your family would never allow it, that's why I turned their plans against them. Alexa shook her head, her mind unable to process what she was hearing. You're lying, she said weakly. I'm not, Alexander said, his voice filled with quiet intensity. I wanted to marry you, Alexa. Not Hannah. My family wanted you too. They've always wanted you. But your father, he refused. He wanted to push Hannah forward because of Zina. He knew if I married you, I would take you away from the Ammons forever. And he couldn't allow that. Alexa's knees felt weak. She gripped the back of a stone bench to steady herself. Then why did you go along with it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander's jaw clenched. Because I had no choice. If I had fought it outright, my family would have been forced to accept Hannah instead. But if I let them believe they were getting what they wanted, I could find a way to protect you. He took a step closer, his voice softer now. So yes, Alexa. I switched the pills. Because I knew the only way to make sure you were safe, the only way to make sure you wouldn't be discarded, was if you carried my child. If you were tied to me permanently. Tears burned in Alexa's eyes. You manipulated me, she whispered. You played along with Hannah's plan just to keep me in your life. Alexander exhaled, his eyes filled with pain. I didn't want to, he admitted. But I couldn't lose you, Alexa. Not after everything. I even knew their plans against you not so early, but I was determined to turn it all around. They are angry at the outcome but they know who I am, they better not act against me. She shook her head, her emotions a tangled mess. And now what? She demanded. You expect me to just accept this? To be okay with it? Alexander's expression softened. No, he said gently. I expect you to hate me. To be angry. But I also expect you to understand that everything I did, was because I love you. Alexa's breath hitched. The words hit her like a shockwave, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. She had spent her whole life believing she was invisible, that no one truly saw her. But now, standing before her, was the one man who had been watching her all along. And he had done the unthinkable to keep her by his side. The realization left her shaken, and for the first time in her life, Alexa didn't know what to do. Did she hate him? Did she love him? Or was she simply too deep in this web of deception to know the difference anymore? The days following Alexander's confession were a blur of emotions for Alexa. She could barely breathe, her heart heavy with the weight of the secrets that had been unveiled. His words haunted her, the truth that he had always loved her, that he had been watching her from the shadows, protecting her in ways she could never have imagined. Yet, despite the weight of his manipulation, there was something undeniable in his eyes. Love. Real, genuine love. And deep down, Alexa knew she couldn't dismiss it so easily. As the days wore on, Alexander made every attempt to show her how much he cared, how deeply he had always cared. He was attentive, thoughtful, far more than she had ever known him to be. Every gesture, every glance, spoke of something deeper. One evening, as the soft glow of sunset bathed the gardens in golden light, Alexa found herself sitting on the edge of a small fountain, lost in thought. The gentle ripples in the water seemed to mirror her inner turmoil. Could she really forgive him? Could she truly open her heart to him, knowing what he had done? A shadow fell over her, and she turned to see Alexander approaching, his handsome face as calm as ever. Yet his eyes betrayed a mixture of hope and uncertainty, as if he, too, was walking on fragile ground. "Alexa," he said, his voice gentle but earnest. "I know I betrayed your trust. I know that what I did was wrong, but I need you to understand something. Everything I did because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." Her heart clenched. "But you used me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You made me a pawn in your family's games. How am I supposed to forgive that?" Alexander dropped to his knees before her, taking her hands in his touch warm and sincere. "I didn't want to hurt you, Alexa. I thought that if I could just get you close enough, if I could just give you something that tied you to me, you'd be safe. I thought I was doing the right thing. And I know now how wrong I was." Tears welled in Alexa's eyes. She had always been so alone, her heart aching for someone to see her, to love her the way Alexander was speaking to her now. She had dreamed of a love like this, one that was real, one that would protect her from the cruelties of the world. But could she trust it now? "I never wanted to hurt you, Alexa," Alexander continued, his voice breaking with emotion. "I never wanted you to feel like a prize or a tool. You're not just someone to be fought over or used for some larger plan. You're everything to me." Her heart fluttered. The tenderness in his eyes, the way he was looking at her, was so raw, so sincere, that it left her breathless. "I need you to believe me," Alexander whispered, his thumb gently brushing away the tears on her cheek. "I love you, Alexa. I've always loved you. I never stopped." The words wrapped around her like a warm embrace, and for the first time in days, Alexa felt something inside her shift. The anger, the pain, the betrayal, slowly, it began to fade. Was it enough to heal the wound he had caused? She didn't know yet, but something inside her stirred, a longing to trust him, to believe in the love he was offering. She met his gaze, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said, her voice trembling. "But I think I want to try." Alexander's face lit up with a mixture of relief and joy. "I'll spend every day proving that I deserve your forgiveness, Alexa. Every single day." He leaned forward slowly, as if asking for permission, and Alexa found herself caught in the warmth of his gaze. Her heart raced, her pulse quickened. The pull between them was undeniable, magnetic, and for a moment, all she could think of was how much she needed him. Then, with a gentle sigh, their lips met. It was soft at first, and tentative. But somehow, in that moment, she knew, she was ready to let go of the past. To let him in. Alexa could see the rawness in Alexander's eyes, the vulnerability that he had never shown before. She realized that he, too, was terrified. Terrified that he had pushed too far, that the love he had fought for would slip through his fingers. "Stay with me," Alexander whispered. "Let me show you that you're not just a pawn. You're my everything, Alexa. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." The sincerity in his voice, the way his eyes searched hers for understanding, was enough to make her heart swell. For the first time in her life, Alexa didn't feel like an outsider in her own world. She felt seen. She felt wanted. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll stay." Over the next few weeks, everything began to change. Alexander's presence in her life grew stronger. He was with her when she needed him most, not just as a lover but as a protector, as someone who truly cared for her well-being. They spent time together in private moments, their bond growing deeper with each passing day. Alexander took her to beautiful places, showing her the world beyond the confines of the mansion she had grown up in. They laughed, they talked, and, at times, they simply sat together in silence, content in each other's company. But amidst the growing love between them, there were challenges. The family still held a tight grip on the narrative, and the truth about Alexa's pregnancy, about how it had come to be, remained hidden from the rest of the world. Alexander's family, who had always seen Alexa as their own, were happy for the both of them. One evening, as they walked along a quiet path in the garden, Alexander stopped and took her hands in his. "There's no one else for me, Alexa," he said, his voice steady. "I've known that for a long time. And I'll do whatever it takes to keep you by my side." Tears filled her eyes as she squeezed his hands, her heart swelling with love. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I've never felt more at home than I do with you." And in that moment, the world felt right again. The love that had been years in the making was finally blossoming, and Alexa knew, no matter what the future held, that she had found the one person who would never let her go. Alexander pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Alexa rested her head on his chest. They stood there together, a quiet promise shared between them: no more lies, no more secrets. Just love. Days passed in a blur, and for Alexa, life had taken on a new rhythm. Alexander was constantly by her side, their connection growing stronger every day. It was hard to believe how quickly everything had changed. The feeling of safety, of being loved, was something she never thought she would experience. But the deeper they fell into their relationship, the more she realized that the world around them was not as simple as it seemed. Despite the growing closeness between her and Alexander, the shadows of her past were always lurking, waiting to pull her back. It didn't take long for Hannah and her mother, Zena, to notice the change. They were both too used to being in control, too used to having power over the people around them, and now they saw that Alexa was no longer the timid, invisible girl they could push around. There was something different about her now, something they couldn't ignore. Zena, who had never truly cared about Alexa, now saw her daughter's future with Alexander slipping away, while Hannah grew increasingly restless. "I can't believe this," Hannah muttered one evening as she paced in the lavish living room. "How is it that Alexa, the poor maid, gets everything? She has Alexander now, and I'm the one who's been left in the dust." Zena watched her daughter with a cold, calculating expression. "Hannah, you've always been spoiled. You've always had everything handed to you, and now, just because you were reckless, you've lost Alexander to that girl." "I didn't lose him," Hannah snapped. "I'm going to get him back. No matter what it takes." Her mother's lips curled into a sly smile. "You won't have to do it alone. I have my ways. We'll make sure that this little Cinderella story doesn't end happily. If Alexander wants to be with Alexa, then he'll learn what it means to cross us." Zena's plan was simple. She knew Alexander's weakness now, his love for Alexa. And she knew that a man like him couldn't ignore the past. So, she would make sure that the man he loved would never truly be free of her grasp. The two women began to scheme, plotting how they would undermine Alexa and make sure her newfound happiness would never last. They knew that the key to breaking her would be to expose everything she had worked so hard to keep hidden. But while they schemed, they didn't realize that Alexander had his own set of plans. He had known that this moment would come. He knew this family, especially Zena, would never truly accept Alexa. But what they didn't know was that Alexander wasn't the same man he had been when he was younger. His loyalty and love for Alexa were more than just romantic, they were driven by a deep sense of justice. And now, with everything on the line, he would make sure that those who had wronged Alexa, those who had tortured her for so many years, would pay. One afternoon, while Alexander and Alexa were walking through the estate, a phone call changed everything. Alexander's face darkened as he listened, his expression tight with anger. "It's done," he said, hanging up the phone, his tone sharp. "We need to go now." Alexa looked at him, her heart racing. "What's happened? What's wrong?" Nothing you need to worry about, Alexander said, his voice calm, but there was a hard edge to it. But I need to make sure this is over. Before Alexa could ask any more questions, Alexander led her to the private car. The drive was tense, with a cold silence hanging between them as they made their way to a secluded part of the estate where Zina and Hannah had set up a meeting with a few influential individuals in the city. The moment they arrived, Alexander stepped out of the car with a resolve that Alexa had never seen in him before. "What are you doing?" Alexa whispered, her voice shaking. Alexander turned to her with a serious look in his eyes. "I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make sure that no one hurts you or your mother again." He didn't wait for her to respond. His steps were firm as he walked toward the meeting. Alexa followed hesitantly, not fully understanding what was happening but trusting him. As they entered the room, Zina and Hannah looked up, surprise flashing across their faces. But there was something dangerous in Alexander's eyes that made them both freeze. "Alex, what are you doing here?" Zina asked, trying to mask the tension in her voice. "I'm here to end this," Alexander said coldly, his voice laced with fury. "I've given you enough chances. No more games. No more lies. You're done." Zina's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. "Don't play dumb," Alexander spat, his tone fierce. "I know what you did to Alexa. I know how you've manipulated her, how you've tried to control her life for your own gain. And I'm not going to let it continue." Alexa felt a wave of relief wash over her, mixed with confusion. She hadn't expected Alexander to go this far, but she could see that his love for her was genuine. "I warned you, Zina," Alexander continued, stepping closer. "I warned you that if you didn't stop, I would make sure you paid the price. Now, it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." Zina opened her mouth to protest, but before she could say anything more, Alexander's lawyer stepped forward, holding up a stack of documents. "Zina Pano, Hannah Amin," the lawyer said, his voice firm. "You are hereby being served with legal papers. You are being sued for defamation and all the manipulation and mistreatment you have subjected Alexa Amin to, as well as the fraudulent actions you've taken, will be held against you in court. The Hamilton family will not stand by while you tear apart our future." The room went silent as the weight of the documents fell on Zina and Hannah. "You can't do this!" Hannah cried, her face pale with disbelief. You can't take everything from us." "I'm not taking anything from you," Alexander said, his voice calm but icy. "I'm taking back what you tried to steal from Alexa. Her dignity, her future, and her peace of mind. And you'll never hurt her again." Zina's face turned red with fury. "You'll regret this, Alexander," she spat. "You'll regret crossing me. You have no idea who you're dealing with." But Alexander stood firm. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with." The following days were a whirlwind. Legal battles began, and as the truth started to surface about Zina and Hannah's manipulation, their influence started to crumble. The Hamilton family had long been one of the most powerful families in the city, and no one dared to stand against them. But now, Zina and Hannah had no choice but to face the consequences of their actions. They had underestimated the power of the Hamilton family, and, more importantly, the power of Alexander's love for Alexa. For Alexa, it was bittersweet. While part of her felt immense relief, knowing that her tormentors would finally pay for what they had done, another part of her struggled with the lingering anger. She had lived her life in fear of them, and now they would be held accountable. But Alexander's unwavering support, his fierce protection of her, gave her the strength to face the future with confidence. Together, they would rebuild. Together, they would make sure the past stayed behind them. And as for Zina and Hannah, their time had come. They had made their choices, and now they would pay the price for everything they had done. The legal battle that had once seemed like an insurmountable obstacle was finally coming to a close. Xena and Hannah's manipulation of Alexa and her family had been laid bare for the world to see. The evidence was undeniable, and the truth was too overwhelming to deny. The courts had ruled in favor of Alexa, and her name was cleared from the taint that had shadowed her for so long. But as the final verdict was handed down, it was Alexander who stood by her side, his arm wrapped securely around her. For the first time in Alexa's life, she felt a sense of peace. The constant weight of worry and fear had been lifted. Her past, once dominated by secrets and cruelty, had been replaced by a future filled with hope. Xena and Hannah were not finished, of course. Xena, in particular, had vowed to fight back, her threats becoming louder as her empire crumbled around her. But it didn't matter anymore. The truth had been set in motion, and no amount of retaliation could erase what had been revealed. The Hamiltons, as powerful as they were, had made sure that the threat of the past would never hang over Alexa's head again. One evening, as the sun began to set over the Hamilton estate, casting a soft glow over the sprawling gardens, Alexander and Alexa sat together in the private garden where they had shared their first heartfelt conversation. The stillness of the evening felt almost surreal, as if the world had stopped moving, allowing them to exist in this peaceful bubble. "Is it over?" Alexa asked, her voice soft, her fingers tracing the edges of a delicate flower beside her. Alexander nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "It's over. The courts have made their decision. Xena and Hannah have no power left. They're done." But even as he spoke the words, there was a shadow of concern that flickered in his eyes. He had done everything in his power to protect Alexa, and though the legal victories were crucial, he knew that there would always be remnants of the past that would threaten their peace. "But it's not just about the courts, is it?" Alexa asked, glancing up at him, her brown eyes searching his face. "There's more to this than the legal battles, Alexander. What happens after?" Alexander reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. "What happens after," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion, "is we live the life we've always deserved. Together. The truth is out now. No one can use you against me anymore. And no one will ever hurt you again." He leaned forward and pecked her forehead, lingering as if to imprint that promise into both of their hearts. For Alexa, it was a bittersweet moment. She had been through so much, years of pain, isolation, and manipulation, but now she had a man beside her who would stand by her side no matter what. Together, they had faced the storm, and they were stronger for it. Though Xena had been dealt a heavy blow, it was Hannah's actions that Alexa would never forget. Her jealousy and bitterness had driven her to cruelty, and while she had tried to use her beauty and charm to manipulate the situation, it was her selfishness that had led her to fail. But even after the verdict, Hannah wasn't ready to let go of her dreams of marrying into the Hamilton family. She couldn't accept the fact that Alexa, who, in her mind, had no right to a life like hers, had somehow captured Alexander's heart. In the dead of night, Hannah found herself standing outside the gates of the Hamilton mansion, her face painted with a mixture of desperation and rage. She knew she had lost, but she couldn't bring herself to walk away from what she had believed was hers by right. The Hamiltons had always been her goal, the pinnacle of success she had been raised to believe in. She hadn't reckoned on the deep bond that had developed between Alexander and Alexa. Their love was not something that could be broken by a simple game of manipulation. Inside the mansion, the final preparations were being made for a grand celebration, one to honor Alexa's victory and the new future that lay before her. Alexander had invited their closest family and friends to mark the end of the legal battles and the beginning of their life together. But as the night wore on, it was clear that Hannah would not be part of it. She had made her choice, and now, she would be left to face the consequences. The party was everything Alexa had hoped for and more. It was not just a celebration of legal victories, but of her own rebirth. She had come so far from the frightened girl who once lived in the shadows of her father's mansion. Now, she stood with Alexander, no longer a pawn in anyone's game but the queen of her own destiny. As the evening came to a close, Alexander pulled her into his arms, twirling her in the center of the grand ballroom. The music played softly in the background, and Alexa couldn't help but feel the weight of the past slipping away. They were finally free, free to love each other without fear, free to build the life they had always wanted. "I still can't believe all of this is real," Alexa whispered, her voice tinged with awe as she rested her head on Alexander's chest. "It is real," he murmured back, his voice thick with love. "Everything that's happening right now is ours. You, me, this future. It's all real." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "I never thought I would get here. But now that I am, I don't want to look back. I want to look forward. To us. To everything we'll build together." And in that moment, standing together in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by family and friends who genuinely cared for her, Alexa realized that her journey, one that had once been filled with fear, rejection, and manipulation, was now complete. She was free. She had the love of a man who cherished her, and she had a future that was full of possibilities. Months passed, and life at the Hamilton mansion flourished with new beginnings. Alexander and Alexa were inseparable, growing closer with every day that passed. Their relationship had weathered the storms of the past, and now, they were stronger than ever. Alexa enrolled in a prestigious medical program, determined to continue her studies and one day fulfill her dreams of becoming a doctor. Alexander, ever supportive, stood by her side as she balanced her education with her responsibilities within the Hamilton family. Her mother finally is living with her again. Together, they traveled the world, seeking new adventures, but always returning to the place that had become their sanctuary, the mansion they now shared. As for Zena and Hannah, their names had been reduced to whispers of the past, their schemes dismantled by the very people they had once tried to control. The Hamiltons, as a family, had stood united in their love for Alexa, and nothing could ever break the bond they had forged. And as Alexa and Alexander stood at the threshold of their future, there was only one thing left to say, one final promise. "We've made it," Alexa said, her voice soft but firm. Together, Alexander agreed, his eyes shining with pride. And so, their story, which had once been marked by betrayal and manipulation, ended in love, redemption, and a future that was bound to be as bright as the love they shared. Thanks for watching. What did you learn from this story?